I guess we can get started while we wait for other people to join us. Again, whoever JC Mudda is, please let me know because I don't have you on my list, but you might be on the list with another name. So if you could just like send me a message if you're presenting, that would be great. In the meantime, I just wanted to welcome you all today to our Humanities Students Talk 12. Basically, this is the 5th Polygence Symposium of Rising Scholars, which is actually really exciting. It's one of our bigger ones. And as you all know, the goal of the symposium is to really celebrate and publicize all the hard work our Polygence scholars have been doing with their mentors. I'm head of mentoring, so I'm kind of in charge of making sure that mentors are, there for students and able to help them with research and like help them acquire new skills, which I think is probably one of the most important things in research. And so we're here to celebrate our students who've worked so hard on the projects for the past couple of months. At this talk, we should have 5 students. And right now, it seems like we may have 4. But anyway, in the meantime, I'll just present the 5. The students' presentations will actually be scored by myself and by an outside judge in the next 48 hours. And so if you have any questions for our speaker, please type it in the Q&A part of the session tab, not the event chat. And we will allot a few minutes after each presentation to Q&A, depending on the time we have. So our first student, I'll just give you guys a quick rundown of who's going to be presenting today. Our first student is Benjamin Malo. He's a junior at Canyon High School in Anaheim, California. Then we have Gokul Velayoudame. I'm really sorry about pronunciation. A sophomore at Mission San Jose High School in Fremont, California. Third, we have Keshav Srikant, a junior at Monte Vista High School, Cupertino, California. Wow, a lot of Californians. And then fourth is Sahiti Srikantam, a freshman at Basis Charter School in Chandler, Arizona. And then last but not least, we have Subhadra, who's joining us from Mercer Island, Washington, and she's a freshman at Mercer Island High School. So thank you all for joining today. And maybe we can just start off straight away with Ben. Ben, I'm going to add you now. There he is. Hi, Ben.
Hi.
It's so nice to see someone. I was like talking out into the void. So, oh, Ben, you froze. Okay, so I'm going to leave now and I'll pop back in and, when you have 2 minutes left. Yeah, you're all good. So
okay, let me
take it away, Ben.
Okay. When there's no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot hurt you. Winston Churchill. Hello, my name is Ben Malo, and I, along with help from my mentor Jeff Hetzel, have spent the last few months researching something that has become more and more pressing for Americans in the past few years. That being the growing polarization of American politics. I picked this subject because it seemed to me at the time that there's no solution for the crazy uncle that starts a fight every Thanksgiving when someone mentions a gender-neutral bathroom. I would soon learn that there is a solution, and it's simpler than you might think. But before we get ahead of ourselves, allow me to start with the problem itself. Throughout my research, I found that most of the troubles began during the 2008 presidential election between Senator John McCain and then Senator Barack Obama. Although both candidates had a mutual respect for one another, it seemed that the people divided fast. The media did what the media does and reacted. Soon there was a whirlwind of rhetoric and from both sides, most notably the Obama is a secret Muslim campaign. You may think that this had little to no impact on the general public, but a survey by Alex Theodoris of UC Merced revealed that a whopping 54% of Republicans still believe that President Obama is deep down a Muslim. This was a blatant lie that was based off of a claim that he would not share his birth certificate. But the liberal media are far from heaven sent. In January of 2019, a picture circulated around the media of a boy in a MAGA hat shouting at a native man playing the drums. A narrative was spun that the boy was antagonizing the native. But when a full video of the situation came out, it was actually the native who had started the confrontation. Now, whether you believe that the boy was in the right or the wrong is not relevant. The truth is that the story was than the media was making it seem. Now, if you thought that was terrifying, listen. Political polarization may be embedded in our DNA. At least, this is what everyone's favorite, fabulous 700s Irish philosopher said. David Hume was revolutionary in his work on social psychology and political philosophy. He stated that people care much more about passion than about reason. This would mean that true political discourse is a fallacy. Hume was a pessimist. Cycles ring eerily true today. People use political discussion as a weapon, not a way to understand one another. With that being said, I do think that there are significant holes within Hume's philosophy that I can poke at to find a solution to this seemingly world-ending problem. Hume did not account for the human ability to be friends. I know it sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. I am convinced that people do not wish to disagree to the extent that they are now. I also believe that through discussion and understanding, we can patch up the gash that divides the United States. What if I told you one of the most famous friendships in American history went against him? Hume stood for. The friendship between Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg was one to aspire to. The two Supreme Court judges disagreed on just about everything. But outstandingly, they remained close friends through both of their lifetimes. Scalia said when he said, "I attack ideas, not people." The two polar opposites would often go to watch plays together, and Scalia would even, famously, send her flowers every day on her birthday. But it isn't just politicians or famous people that was someone they could not be more dissimilar to. Have you ever heard of a man by the name of Daryl Davis? Davis is an extraordinary man who had devoted his life to converting KKK members out of the Klan. His first experience with the Klan was at a bar while doing a show. This is where he would meet Roger Kelly, a high-ranking member amongst the Maryland chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. He did not antagonize Kelly when they first met. Instead, he had a drink with him. They would form an unlikely friendship that would lead Kelly to leave the KKK. What followed was Davis helping 400 members leave. So, even though my solution may seem childish and far-fetched, I believe in it wholeheartedly. I mean, what's more American than discussion? Well, maybe baseball, but nobody watches baseball. As a human race, we have put a man on the moon, created bombs large enough to eradicate whole planets, and harnessed the energy of the sun to run water into a faucet. Is it too far-fetched to talk to one another? I know that this is coming from a 17-year-old kid who likes to surf and will occasionally fail a calculus test. But it seems like no one else will say it, so it looks like I have to. It is my generation that will help to reconcile this nation. So why not start now? Let's weed out the enemies within by creating happily disagreeing allies. Thank you, and I wish you all the best on your personal journey to heal this nation.
Thank you so much, Ben. Oh, where did you go? Hang on, let's see. Ben, can you request to join again? That was, yes. As Oasis said, it was a great job. If anyone has questions for Ben, please either request to share video and audio and you can ask them live, or you can just put them in the Q&A tab and I'll ask them for you. We lost Ben. Let's see. There you are. Hang on, let me add you again.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, it's okay. I didn't know if I had like stopped your video by accident or if you were like, okay, I'm off to surf now. But
No, I was sitting there. I was like, well, what do I do now? So I saw the leave button.
So you decided to leave. That's fair enough. You did such a great job. I was just saying that Oasis, one of our organizers, mentioned that. And we're waiting for some question and answers from the audience. If they want to tune in live and actually share their screen and audio, they can do that, or they can put it in the Q&A. In the meantime, I'm kind of curious as to why you decided to research this topic.
Well, so long story short, I had a friend come out to me, and in my friend group was very conservative, so I had like doubts on how they would take like him in, and I had made an assumption that they wouldn't handle it well, but they were great, and I have always been a centrist, so I thought to myself, well, like if a proud centrist is making assumptions about people because of their political beliefs, like this is getting a little out of hand. So I decided to research that.
Okay, and then what do you think was kind of like the most difficult part of your research for you to sort of grapple with?
The whole idea that it may be embedded in our DNA. I think the more I did research into the social psychology of it, I also read some Jonathan Haidt, stuff like that, and it became clear to me how large of a mountain we're gonna have to climb, and it was kind of terrifying a little bit.
And so you decided that the mountain needs to be climbed one step at a time.
Yes, and it starts with one person at a time, deciding to have a discussion with another person.
Great. Well, I'm so glad that you carried out this project. I hope you continue doing your research post Polygence, because I think it's really important, and I think it came across that you're so invested in it, and it's a really important topic to talk about. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if anyone has questions for Ben, feel free to put it in the Q&A section.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and then Ben will answer you. Hopefully he won't leave us again. Okay, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to move on to our next presenter, who's Gokul. So I think, actually, Ben, maybe you do have to leave us at this point.
Thank you.
And I will bring Gokul into the conversation. Hi, Gokul. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Are your slides ready to go? Are you ready to tell us all about your research?
Yes, I'm ready.
Perfect.
So I can just share my screen.
Yeah, and then as I said to Ben, I will pop in when you have 2 minutes left, just so that you know that that's when you need to wrap up.
Okay.
Great. Good luck.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gokul, and here's my presentation on the history and evolution of propaganda. I actually worked on this project with my mentor, Jimmy McKee, and I would just like to thank him for helping me develop my ideas for this project. So first, I'm going to establish a definition for propaganda. Then I'm going to look at some examples of propaganda from the 20th century. And finally, we're going to look at some examples of modern day propaganda, also known as fake news. So first of all, what is propaganda? My definition of propaganda is the use of media to make someone feel a certain way in order to achieve a certain goal. Propaganda exists in many forms. It could be a book, a television show, or a newspaper, and it is used for a variety of purposes. It could be used to fund the military, encourage civilian morale, or even incite a rebellion. And today, propaganda still exists. It's just known as fake news. So I'm just going to go over some examples of propaganda from the 20th century. Here's my first example. It's this propaganda poster from 1917, and it was commissioned by the US government during World War I, and it says ammunition. And remember, bonds buy bullets. The poster depicts a young soldier who is caught in the heat of battle, and he is clearly out of ammunition, and he extends an arm toward the audience in order to call for their help. So this poster is an example of propaganda because it aims to make the audience feel a certain way in order to achieve a certain goal. The intended emotion here is pity because the audience sees this young, helpless soldier who is fighting in one of the world's most deadliest wars, and he needs their help. And the creator of the poster hopes that this emotion of pity for this young soldier will drive the viewers of this poster to buy government bonds, which in turn will fund ammunition for many soldiers like this character. So my next example of propaganda is the Pravda, which was formed in 1917, and it was one of the many official newspapers of the Soviet Union. So the goal of the Pravda was to indoctrinate readers on communist theories, and the style of the Pravda actually opposed those of Western newspapers. The Western newspapers often had incendiary or controversial headlines that aimed to cause dividing opinions among the readers. However, the Pravda wanted everyone to think, feel, and act the same way, so its titles and style differed greatly. And the Pravda was often weaponized by the Soviet government, namely Joseph Stalin. So during the 1930s, in the Great Purge, where Stalin suspected there were traitors in the government offices, the Pravda actually supported his purging of the government, and it had incendiary titles such as Squash the Reptiles and No Mercy to the Traitors of the Motherland. So the Pravda was actually an example of propaganda because it always aimed to make the Soviet citizens feel a certain way in order to always support the Soviet government and whatever actions and endeavors the Soviet government engaged in. So finally, let's look at some modern day propaganda. Today, modern day propaganda exists as fake news, and fake news either seeks to misinform or disinform people, and it often spreads through social media such as Facebook or Twitter. And a study by MIT actually concluded that fake news spreads faster than genuine news on Twitter. So here's a fake news article I found on the internet, and it's from the website Before It's News, and it's about the COVID-19 vaccine, and it claims why the vaxxed are acting strange and why it will get even worse. So it says, how many people do you know who took the shot are having adverse effects? The spike protein seems to have a runaway production once injected. This is one of the issues. The deception is greater than most of us can imagine. It then continues and says, consider that they know their shot will kill you. Wouldn't it be wise to inject 80% of the subjects with saline solution so they can tell everyone how good they feel after receiving the shot? And the other 20% will be much easier to cover up. The most important goal of the globalists right now are getting you to take their shot. How many ways can they convince you that you have to take their shot? They have a plan and they have technology to constantly improve on the delivery of their plan. Listen to how the mass die-offs will take place over the next 5 years and why. So obviously this article is an example of propaganda because it aims to make viewers feel angry or scared of vaccines in order to get them to avoid the vaccines. And here are some red flags I spotted while looking at this article. The first was this very controversial or incendiary title. It says, why the vax are acting strange and why it will get even worse. This title is meant to evoke a strong emotional reaction from the reader or the audience, an emotion of either anger or fear of the vaccines. And another red flag I spotted were these couple photoshopped images here. One is a photoshopped image of a mob and another is a photoshopped image of an eye. And these images have little to no correlation with the actual content of the article, which is another indicator of fake news. And also I noticed that there are a lot there were in general a lot of pop-up ads on this website and ads on the sidebar, which is another characteristic of fake news websites. And also, in general, this article was very short. It was only a few paragraphs. So another characteristic of fake news articles is that they will be very short, and so that's something to look out for when you're reading an article. And finally, the most obvious red flag is just that this claim is outlandish. Obviously, the COVID vaccine won't kill you, and obviously, the 80% of recipients aren't injected with a saline solution. So that was the most obvious red flags. So here's how to avoid fake news. The first thing you should do is just look at the credibility of the source. Is this source known for producing high quality works or high quality journalism? Then look at outlandish claims in the article or incendiary titles. For example, the article we just looked at had a very incendiary title of Why the Vaxxed Are Acting Strange, which is meant to evoke anger or fear, and also outlandish claims such as the COVID-19 vaccine will kill you. And also, fake news websites will have a lot of pop-up ads and ads on the sidebar. And they will also have photoshopped images that have little to no correlation with the actual content of the article. So this is a helpful infographic which will show how to spot fake news and avoid it. So here are some key things you can do. You can consider the source and look and see if it's credible. Then look at the author and see if they're renowned for producing high quality content. Then check your biases and see if your own judgments or beliefs affect your perception of the article. Then finally, look at the supporting sources and see if the evidence is credible or if there is any evidence at all to support the claims that are made in the article. And also you can see if the source is satire or if it's meant to be a joke. And finally, you can ask experts or even ask someone near you if they think the article is fake news or not. So the next time someone shares an article on Facebook or Twitter, and look to see if any of these red flags apply and take the necessary action. Thanks for listening.
Wow, thank you, Gokul. I think that's a very timely piece of research. So very, very interesting and great tips for anyone who's going to be using social media, I think. Does anyone in our audience have any questions for Gokul about his research? Oh, so we have a question from Ali Farghali, who I think is a mentor with us now. And he is asking, is propaganda fake news by definition? What about propaganda for a good cause, such as peace or tolerance? What are your thoughts on that, Gokul?
Yeah, I'm not saying that propaganda always has to be for a bad cause, such as, to spread misinformation. Propaganda can be for a good cause, such as, to increase civilian morale during times of hardship. So I do think propaganda can be used for good causes. It's just that we should be aware that it can be used in a negative manner, and we should learn to avoid propaganda that is used for negative purposes.
Absolutely. Great question and great answer. Ali says thank you. Anyone else have questions for Gokul about his research? So while we wait for people to come up with questions, if they have any, I have one for you. What do you think was the most surprising thing you discovered while you were researching?
One of the most surprising things was just the fact that fake news actually travels faster than genuine news on Twitter. I felt that was kind of shocking because I guess it's due to the presence of bots on the Twitter website that help spread fake news. And I feel like, Twitter should take more action to prevent the spread of fake news.
Okay, so did you do like a quantitative analysis, or was this more qualitative?
I think the study by MIT was more of a qualitative analysis. They just observed, how fast the fake news spread compared to genuine news.
Okay, and then I have one more question before we move on to our next presenter. How do you think this research project and kind of the research that you did for it has changed the way that you approach social media?
Yeah, so the research I did really exposed kind of the dangers of social media because, social media was originally intended to be a good thing to connect various people and form various communities. However, social media can also be used for bad, such as, the spread of fake news, the spread of misinformation, which can really cause negative effects, such as, people are avoiding the vaccine because of just random articles they read on the internet. So really, fake news and this research exposed me to both the good and the bad of social media.
Right. And so I'm guessing that now your approach is much more analytical when you go on like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And are you sharing all this information with your friends?
Yeah, making sure that whenever they see an article that's being shared, they see if any of these red flags apply, and maybe to report the article if it actually is fake news.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much, Gokul. This was a great presentation. I personally really enjoyed learning from it as well. Next up, we actually have Keshav. Keshav, I think you're there. You're not lined up to moderate. Gokul, if you want to leave, yes. Okay, bye. If you can, you need to request share audio and video so that I can get you on to present. So Keshav, if you're there, I think you are. You just need to request to share audio and video. And perhaps, Subha, would you be willing to jump in now and present your research while we wait? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to add Subha.
Hi everyone.
Subha. I think you go by Subha, right? I know that you're Subhadra, but okay. All right, great. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. I'm gonna leave you the stage and I will jump in if you're approaching the 8-minute mark and you need to wrap up. But good luck with your presentation. Looking forward to hearing.
Sounds good. Let me turn on the presentation mode. Sorry. 1 second here. Let me present. All right. Great. So let me go back to the beginning. All right. Sorry. Give me a second to get set up here. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Vadlamannati and I'll be presenting on the gender disparity of refugee earnings in the United States. My mentor was Holly Dykstra and I did this through Polygence. So let's look a little bit more about me and my project. So I'm a sophomore at Mercer Island High School in Mercer Island, Washington, and I'm interested in the fields of data science, computational linguistics, and math. This research paper specifically uses data science methods to study the gender gap between male and female refugee earnings. I got into this area of research through my nonprofit work on several local refugee organizations. From that, I learned more about the unique struggles and challenges refugee youth face in everyday life. I thought that data science would be a great way to study the gender gap and its underlying causes in a computational and concrete way. So we learned a little bit about me, so let's move on to the next slide. So this is a table of contents. First, we'll have an introduction of the data. Second, we'll have the analysis. Third, we'll look at underlying causes of the gender gap. And fourth, we'll conclude and provide policy solutions. All right, so here's the introduction. So there are currently 24,600,000 refugees around the world. Refugees are also a subset of displaced people or people forced to leave their homes. Around 82 million people are displaced in some ways, which means that 1 in 95 people, over 1% of the total world's population, is displaced. We can see that this is such a large number for how little media attention the refugee population receives. So, now that we learned a little bit more about the statistics related to the refugee population worldwide, let's look at in the United States. Here's a graph of the refugee numbers admitted per year in the United States. We can see that in 1980, around 210,000 refugees were accepted, while in 2021, this number is only 10,000 refugees. We can see a steady decrease in the number of refugees accepted every year by the United States government. In total, over 3 million refugees have been accepted into the United States for asylum. All right, so we did a lot of background information, so let's look at the actual data of our data science research. I used the annual study of refugees, the ASR 2018 dataset primarily. It was a good choice of data because it had a nationwide study of over 5,000 individual refugees, and it also were asked many important questions like age, gender, marital status, pay, and household income. For those reasons, I decided to use this dataset. So now we learned a little bit more about what dataset I was using to study about the refugees and the gender gap, but how did we analyze this data to find these results? So we can see here, so how does the first motivating question to me was how would gender determine the distribution of earnings between male and female refugees? As we can see here, on the left, we have a graph of the male distribution of earnings, and on the right, we have a distribution of the female earnings. We can see that the male graph seems more skewed to the right, while the female graph seems more skewed to the left. We can also notably see that there are less outliers on the female graph than the male graph, representing that there are less successful female refugees than male refugees. Males are also roughly earning $1 to $2 more when looking at the mean and median. Now, you might think that this number is very small, but over a year, assuming a 40-hour work week, this number is $3,061 lost every single year. Now, let's look a little bit more about the statistics side of my research project. So to fully understand what we're going to be looking at, let's go over a brief overview about regression tables. So a regression table shows us the coefficients of a regression, specifically a linear regression like y equals mx plus b, between multiple variables in different columns. Each new column adds a new variable to be taken into account. A statistical significance is also another thing we need to understand. It's a measure of how well an input, the x variable, predicts the output variable, the y variable. We use different kinds of asterisks to determine how significant an input variable is at predicting an output variable. The methods are listed on the slide. Now, let's look at the main regression table here. As we can see here, we can look at the male variable and see that it is statistically significant throughout the entire, even when considering other demographic variables. This is very important because it leads us to show that the gender of an individual is one of the main factors in determining the wage of an individual. The next slide also describes some of the other findings we found. We found that the years of schooling is also very important, and the English skill and the highest degree before the United States don't seem as important as they don't have much statistical significance. From this, we can conclude that two of the main factors that determine a refugee's wage is the gender of the refugee and the years of schooling before the United States. Now, let's look at the underlying causes of such a gender gap between male and female refugees. So, to do this, we need to introduce two new data sets. Again, the first is the Global Gender Gap, and the second is the Human Development Index. The Global Gender Gap Index benchmarks national gender gaps on economic, educational, and health and political criteria. In short, this is basically a number between 0 and 1, which measures a country's gender inequality. The higher it is, the more gender inequality experienced, and the lower it is, the less gender inequality experienced in that country. The Human Development Index is the exact same, except it measures the development of a country rather than the gender inequality. Now, let's move on to the next slide and see what we found through doing by adding these two new data sets. So we found that increases in human development by 0.1 index point benefits males by 54 cents, but barely affects female salary. Let's unpack this. This means that developments in human development don't affect females at all and only benefit males. However, increases in gender equality by the GGP variable benefits male by 57 cents and benefits female salaries by $1.30, a result significant to the 1% level, or 3 stars. Now, this means that decreasing the gender gap in refugees' home countries allows for an increase in wage for both male and female refugees, but increasing human development only benefits male refugees. This is very significant because we find that we need to decrease the gender inequality experience to help all people, while just building things like human development only benefits the male refugees. Now, let's look at the conclusion and some policy suggestions, like what are the implications of these results? Now, there are two different policy suggestions that I look at. The first is cash assistance, and the second is job and vocational training. Both of these are specifically targeted towards female refugees. The current policies, the refugee cash assistance provided in the United States, is not enough. It has a lot of different restrictions on who and can receive it, and it is a very non-clear process for refugees trying to get this. Instead, the new policy, also, it is the same for both male and female refugees. However, for example, a new policy could be providing female refugees $54 more per month because that is the amount they're losing in this gender gap. There are some restraints to such a policy. For example, it doesn't solve for the root cause of such a gender gap. The second is job or vocational training. As we know, about 32% of female refugees covered in this study have no English skill at all. These ESL classes are often not readily available to refugees in the United States. A new policy could mandate these English learning classes to be provided through the government. Now, let's look at some conclusions. My analysis demonstrates that female refugees face a significant gender gap in the United States, which is influenced by countries in refugees' home countries, such as human development or gender inequality experienced. Now, I just want to conclude by looking at the importance of closing a gender gap. By closing a gender gap, a statistics from Kabir and Klugman 2019 shows that $1.4 trillion will be added to the top 30 refugee hosting countries. In the United States, that's another $2 billion almost being added to the national GDP. The importance of closing the gender gap between male and female refugees is not a statistic to be overlooked. Thank you. I'm open to questions now.
Thank you, Subha. That was really, really interesting. If anyone has questions for Subha, you can do so either by requesting to share audio or you can put them in the chat. So we have another question from Ali. Thank you, Ali, for being very engaged in our discussion today. So he's wondering, your policy solutions focus on the situation in the US. How about solutions in other countries? Is this something you had a chance to look at?
Yeah, that's true. So I actually didn't look at solutions in other countries specifically in my research. I think it would be very similar to what the situation is in the United States. Like, for example, I know that the UNHCR did a study that shows that no refugee hosting countries have policies specifically targeted towards refugee women, which is, of course, a worldwide problem. So sort of the same policy solutions like providing, extra cash assistance or vocational training to refugee women to get them on the same page as refugee men could still be used in those countries.
Great. Any other questions? You can stop sharing your screen, actually, if you want. Yeah. So,
all right.
Okay, while we wait for other questions, I have one for you. So you concluded with two potential solutions, right? Which was cash and vocational training job. While you were doing your research, did you ever think like, actually, you know what, this could also be another, like, did you think of potential solutions that could be helpful?
Yeah, so I think these two solutions were the main ones that I thought about, mainly because these solutions like already build upon what is already there in the United States. Like, for example, there's already like refugee cash assistance, and there's already some like English learning classes, but they're not mandated by the government. So sort of rather than finding my own solutions, I looked at the problems in the government, in the current government's policies for refugees, and I tried to improve them by, the new suggestions. So that was kind of the approach I took towards it, rather than like a forwards approach. I looked like back on it, like looked at the problems in the current policies, read through them, and then made the solutions there.
Excellent. And then while we're waiting for other questions, I'll ask you another one. How do you think this research is going to affect, what you want to study in the future? I mean, you're very young, but did you learn something or did you discover something through your research that you're excited to pursue in the future?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the fields of data science and, specifically learning more about machine learning is something I really want to do in the future. So maybe in the future, I know a lot more about, how statistics can be used in like real world problems, which is, of course, can be useful in any field that you choose. So I think in the future, I want to expand on data science by also learning more about machine learning and maybe even using machine learning to study this kind of problem. And I think it's also useful because of my, volunteer work. And I thought it was, a really fulfilling thing for me to do.
Yeah, you were able to integrate two areas of interest in one. And you did so very, very well. So well done. And thank you so much for sharing your research and the results that you discovered with us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and please stick around because actually Keshav is here.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're going to have our last and final presentation unless Sahiti also pops up. But thank you so much, Subhadra. This was amazing. And please stick around for the rest of today's talk.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now up next. Oh, we lost Keshav. Keshav, if you're there, please request access again. Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a bit lagging, but we can hear you.
Right.
Thank you so much for making it. We were worried there for a minute. We didn't know if you were going to be there or not. So it's good to see you. And I don't know if you were here for like the instructions, but basically you have 8 minutes to present. When we're nearing the 8 minutes, I'll kind of pop in and like just be silent, but you'll see me. So you'll know to wrap up, and then we'll have a few more minutes for Q&A because I think we're approaching the end of our panel time. So let's get started.
Sorry, I am trying to share my screen right now. Hopefully that'll happen shortly. Hello, can you still hear me? All right, sorry for the technical issues. I will begin now. I'm Keshav Srikant, and today I'll be talking about EV adoption in California, which was a project I did with my mentor, Mahmoud Ramadan. So, a little bit about me. I live in the California Bay Area. I'm interested in economics and public policy, which actually led me to this project of examining public policy in regards to electric vehicles, which both connected to these interests and is also related to a subject that's also near and dear to my heart, which is climate change, because I live, as I said, in California, which has been had a terrible wildfire season over the past few years. So a little bit more about what electric vehicle or EV adoption is. So EV adoption, numerous studies have found that EV adoption and electrifying the transport sector is crucial to fighting climate change and has other important societal benefits like reducing air pollution or increasing equity. And many governments, and including the state government of California, have announced their intention to phase out gasoline cars. California Governor Gavin Newsom has said he wants to phase out gasoline cars by 2035. But currently, goals for EV adoption are not being met. In California, only 1.2% of registered car owners registered cars are electric vehicles. However, the state government can play an important role in EV adoption, and today I will be discussing how California and what policies California can adopt to increase EV adoption. So first, the commonly discussed barriers to EV adoption, the major one is cost. EVs remain more expensive than gasoline vehicles. And a December 2017 paper published by the International Council on Clean Transportation looked at the demographics of electric vehicle buyers and found that they're disproportionately higher income. Another study found that the low-income population is particularly sensitive to the price of electric vehicles. Overcoming this cost barrier is crucial. A second commonly discussed barrier is the lack of EVs at nearby dealers in disadvantaged neighborhoods. Basically, people who argue this is a barrier argue that dealers in disadvantaged neighborhoods don't stock electric vehicles, meaning people in those neighborhoods don't buy electric vehicles, and meaning that dealers won't stock them, and that leads to a loop. However, a study found that the measured impact on EV adoption because of this problem is small and insignificant. Another barrier which is discussed is the lack of consumer awareness. People don't know about an option of buying an electric vehicle. And indeed, polls have found that this is true, and logically, this makes sense. If people don't know that EVs exist, they're less likely to buy electric vehicles. Finally, another commonly discussed barrier to EV adoption is price discrimination at dealers. The dealers increase the price and drive a harder bargain for electric vehicles. However, again, the same UC Davis study found that this barrier is also insignificant in the grand scheme of EV adoption. So, as you may guess, with California setting an ambitious goal of 2035 to eliminate selling gasoline cars, they already have many existing policies in place to increase EV adoption. Here are the California Clean Fuel Reward, which is a point-of-sale rebate of $1,500. This means as soon as you buy an electric vehicle, you get $1,500 back. There's the California Vehicle Rebate Program, which is targeted, and the amount you get back is based on income. You can get up to $4,500 depending on your income. They're within 3 months. There's the Clean Air Vehicle Decal Program, or more commonly known as the Express Lane, and this means you're able to travel in the express lane with an electric vehicle, even if you're driving solo. There are also various other small exemptions from regulations, like weight exemptions, and California offers a loan assistance program with setting up home charging. Furthermore, there are often additional incentives depending on the county. So, incentives are as a whole effective at reducing the cost barrier, but a lot of how it depends on how those incentives are structured. A paper called Effective Electric Vehicle Design looked at 4 major factors in determining the effectiveness of electric vehicle incentives: timing, targeting, durability, and simplicity. So timing is how fast should consumers receive their incentives. Within 3 months, within a year if it's a tax incentive, immediately if it's a point-of-sale rebate, and numerous studies and simple logic corroborates the fact that consumers prefer when they get their incentives back fast. In fact, it's just staggering margin. Consumers value a $2,000 tax incentive at around only $500 because they often get it back a year after they bought the car, whereas they value a $2,000 quick rebate, which they get back within 3 months, at around $1,800. Shifting incentives to quick rebates and point-of-sale incentives will make those point-of-sale rebates will make incentives even more effective. There's also the question of targeting, who should receive incentives. And studies and a test model, the Replace Your Ride program in California, found that targeting incentives work. There's also the question of durability. How long-term should the incentives be? Should they be renewed every year, or should they be set for a scale of 10 years? And indeed, durable incentives are a good idea because they send a message to car companies that prices for electric vehicles will be artificially low for a long time, and sends a message to those car companies to invest in manufacturing electric vehicles. The final factor to consider is simplicity. Colorado's incentive program is very generous, but Colorado is not known as a leader of electric vehicle adoption, and that is because their incentive program is very complex and hard to understand. Having a simple incentive program people can take advantage of is crucial for those incentives to be effective. There is one downside of incentives, however. They're expensive to maintain. But incentives don't need to be monetary to be effective. So for governments who may not want to spend a lot of cash on incentives, they can do stuff like building more HOV lanes. Since studies have found that a carpool lane is about 70% as effective as a $2,000 incentive, monetary incentive. The second thing to consider is consumer awareness and how we can overcome that barrier. Studies indicate that increasing consumer awareness and increasing outreach will greatly increase EV adoption. However, the general public lack awareness about electric vehicles. Only 33% of Californians knew about the state incentive for electric vehicles in 2016, which will obviously influence their thoughts about the price of electric vehicles and whether to buy one. However, governments have significant power to increase consumer awareness. A literature review published in the International Council on Clean Transportation in March 2017 found the government could host lotteries, do outreach events. They had significant convening power. They could establish partnerships with businesses, and anything the government does garners media attention. Thus, the government could play a crucial role in increasing consumer awareness and helping overcome this barrier. The final topic to consider is dealer incentives. While the actions of dealers, as I mentioned, are not a significant barrier in EV adoption, introducing small dealer incentives can still greatly help with EV adoption and encouraging more people to buy electric vehicles. Basically, money can be given to dealers for either stocking electric vehicles, selling electric vehicles, or just knowing more about electric vehicles in general. And whilst as I mentioned, giving money to dealers to stocking EVs isn't very effective. Giving money to dealers for selling electric vehicles does encourage them to make that sale. A study that looked at the Connecticut Dealer Incentive Program, which gave dealers just around $300 to $400 for each electric vehicle sale, found that the dealer's inclination to make a sale of an electric vehicle more than doubled, which clearly means that introducing these dealer incentives can increase EV adoption. Again, these dealer incentives do not need to be large. They can be small and still have a big impact. So conclusion. So some of the barriers that are commonly brought up when we talk about EV adoption, like price discrimination or the distance that people in disadvantaged neighborhoods have to drive to find a dealer with electric vehicles, are not really that significant. But there are barriers like the cost and like consumer awareness. But those barriers can be overcome. We can increase EV adoption by changing the incentive structure, where the government has a powerful role and can increase consumer awareness, and adding dealer incentives can also greatly help increase EV adoption. And there are so many benefits if we adopt these policies. We can mitigate climate change, reduce air pollution, and increase equity. And all of this shows that public policy matters, and that we have all the tools to create good public policy that can lead us to a renewable and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your research, the results, and this great presentation with all of us. I definitely learned something new today, so that's from everyone, really. Do we have any questions from our audience? You can stop sharing your slides if you want, or not. It's up to you. So we have a question. And the question is, do you recommend state-subsidized EVs to encourage more low-income people to buy EVs?
Yeah, so that's very similar to incentives, and generally that does work, and that's why I mentioned targeting as well, which is a way so that if governments don't want to spend a lot of money on incentives, they can target it towards low-income people to overcome that barrier of currently EVs are being bought by high-income folks.
Great. And then we have another question, which is, what makes California different than other states in their EV usage and policies? Or what have you found through your research?
Well, California is a leader in EV adoption, and part of that is they have tried very much to create programs to increase EV adoption. I think the goal to eliminate gasoline cars by 2035 is one of the most ambitious goals in the country. And I think the main difference between California and other states is they've just really tried to create a lot of incentives. And if you look at the number of incentives California has versus the number of incentives other states has, there's a very big difference. And they have also tried to include equity in those incentives and have created pretty steep targeting, which is also a difference I saw compared to other states.
Great. That's excellent. Excellent questions, excellent answers. Let me ask you one final question, which I've been asking all our speakers, or almost all our speakers today. What did you find most surprising when you were doing your research?
I was kind of surprised by the wide gap between how much consumers would value like a tax incentive of $2,000 in a year and an immediate point of sale rebate. Like I thought maybe it'd be like $2,000 versus $1,500, but I was like shocked when I saw the statistics that showed that a tax incentive of $2,000 is only really worth $500 to consumers. That was very shocking to me.
Great. Well, I think all of us learned so much from your presentation today, and thank you so much for sharing it with us. I want to thank everyone who attended, especially those who asked questions and who were engaged in our students' presentations, and to all our students and your mentors. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've learned over the course of your time with us here at Polygence. And I hope you can stick around and go and attend other panels. I'm sure we'll be learning a lot from other students during the course of today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, I'll see you around, hopefully. Bye. Bye, everyone.